What's going on, guys? We're back. We got another video today, this one on heredity. All right, so before we jump into heredity today, we need to kind of remember the last couple of videos we watched. We shot a video on the miraculous molecule of DNA, right? How DNA, that really big molecule that scrunches up to fit inside every single cell, carries all the information to code for to build a living organism, right? So that's pretty phenomenal. Another video we talked about asexual types of reproduction, asexual and sexual reproduction, the strategies organisms use to pass on that DNA to the next generation. We also talked about cell division, mitosis and meiosis. Remember, mitosis happens in your body cells, your somatic cells, but meiosis happens in your reproductive cells, right? You create those gametes that have half the amount of DNA as the original parent, and when those two gametes from a mom and a dad combine during fertilization, that creates a unique offspring with half the DNA from both parents. So that's gonna be really important, all that, when we start talking about heredity. So let's jump into it. All right, heredity. What is heredity? Heredity is the passing of genes from parent to offspring. So let's write that down. Passing of genes from parent to offspring. Boom. All right, guys. So remember, offspring just means like the kid. Offspring is like the product of reproduction, right? So passing of genes from parent to offspring. Remember, genes with a G, not with a J, right? These aren't clothing items. These are your DNA. We'll talk about that in a minute. But a way to remember heredity, this is passing of the genes from parent to offspring. So your DNA actually gets passed on to you from your parents, right? Makes sense. So you can kind of think of it as like a family heirloom or something. Maybe you had a great-great-great-great-grandparent or grandparent that passed on their family necklace, their family ring, their family wedding dress, whatever it was, and it got passed down to their parents, and then your parents passed down to you, right? You're inheriting that item from your parents. Same thing with your DNA. You inherit your genes and your DNA from your parents. So that's heredity. Okay, so let's go over some key vocabulary, then we're gonna do some practice examples of looking at the probability or the percent chance that if two parents were to have a kid, what chance will that kid actually have a specific trait? All right, so let's review a gene. Gene should be reviewed. So remember, a gene is a section, so DNA is really big. If DNA is a library, a gene is one book in that library. It's a section of DNA that codes for a particular trait. All right, so let's write that down. Gene is a section of DNA that codes for a specific trait. Boom. A section of DNA that codes for a specific trait. All right, so maybe an example is my example, all right, EX for example. Maybe example today, we'll do eye color. I think we're gonna use that a lot today. Eye color. All right, so you have an eye color gene in your DNA. One section of that really long DNA molecule codes for what eye color you're gonna have, right? That's one gene. But remember, that's a gene, and a trait, guys, remember, a trait's a specific eye color you're gonna have. Right, so you have a gene for eye color, and maybe the trait that you have is either blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, whatever, hazel eyes, right? That's the trait that you have, but the gene is the section, right? So think gene more general, trait more specific. All right, and then we gotta talk about this new vocab word called an allele. These are different versions of the same gene. So this is pretty interesting because everybody has in their DNA two copies of every gene. So you have a copy from your mom and a copy from your dad for eye color. Right? So maybe you get a copy from your mom for blue eyes and a copy from your dad for brown eyes. And when those two come together and make you, are you gonna have brown or blue eyes, a mixture of the two? Let's talk about it. Right? So first, let's write down about what an allele is. It's a different version of the same gene. Different version of a, nope, I'm gonna write, it's not a, I'm gonna say the same gene. Right? Be more specific here. Different version of the same gene. Different version of the same gene. All right? So we're doing eye color. Maybe you have a gene, an allele for me, maybe, so EX example. Example. Maybe you have an allele for maybe blue eyes, or maybe you have an allele for brown eyes, Or maybe you have two alleles for brown eyes. Let's do some examples, right? So the funny thing about an allele is that an allele can either be dominant or recessive. There's two types of inheritable traits or alleles, right? You get two versions of each gene, that's called an allele. An allele can either be dominant or it can be recessive. So what does that mean, dominant versus recessive? Well, dominant is kind of self-explanatory. Dominate means it dominates the other gene. So you get paired together, right? If you have a dominant gene, that one masks, like takes over the recessive gene, right? It takes over the other gene. So if you have a dominant allele, that one shows up in your appearance, right? Dominant always shows up. Recessive, you need two copies of a recessive allele for that to actually show up. Because anytime a dominant one shows up, that one's always going to come. So you're actually, this is a key point. I'm going to write this down, maybe here in the center because it's so important, is that you are not a mixture of your parents' genes. You either show the dominant or the recessive form of that gene, right? So if you get an allele for brown eyes and an allele for blue eyes from your mom or your dad, you're not going to be a mixture of brown or blue eyes. You're either going to be brown or blue because one's dominant and one's recessive. So I'm going to write that down real fast as a star. Let's do green because it's so important. I'm going to put it right here in the middle because I'm running out of room. Okay, boom, star. Okay, it's going to be offsprings, traits are not a blend of parents, but either dominant or recessive. Whoa, all right, that's really big. It's really important, so I'm gonna put 2 stars. Okay, so you're not a blend of your parents' genes, right? There are some rare examples we're not going to talk about today. We're going to talk about incomplete dominance or codominance. For the most part, though, right? Like I said, if you get an allele for blue eyes and an allele for brown eyes, one from each parent, you're not a mixture of brown and blue eyes. You're either brown or blue eyes. Another example is freckles or no freckles, or dimples or no dimples, right? You don't have like a half a dimple. You either have dimples or you don't have dimples, depending on which one's dominant and which one's recessive. So let's go over what dominant and recessive mean again. So dominant traits mask or take over the recessive traits. All right, so dominant traits or dominant alleles are traits or alleles that mask. So when I say mask, okay, I mean like to like take over and not let the other one show up, right? So mask are traits that mask the recessive allele. Oh, so I said traits, I'm going to say with traits. Unless recessive trait / allele. All right, so dominant traits mask the recessive ones. So example of this, most of the time, not always, most of the time, darker colors are usually dominant and take over versus light colors. So an example of a dominant trait is actually brown eyes, because brown eyes is dominant to blue eyes. So I'm going to write EX, for example. The brown eyes trait is an example of a dominant allele. If you have an allele from your mom for brown eyes and an allele from your dad for blue eyes, you're going to have brown eyes, because brown eyes is dominant. It takes over, it masks the recessive allele. All right, so if that's dominant, what do you think recessive means? That's right, yeah, recessive is going to mean it's the allele that is expressed only in the absence, which means the dominant trait is not there. It only shows up in your appearance if you don't have a dominant allele, right? So it's the recessive allele actually, I'm going to change it. I'm going to say is only expressed. Recessive is only expressed. Is only expressed. So expressed, I mean like shows up in your appearance. So the recessive allele is only expressed in the absence of a dominant trait or allele, right? So express means to show up, and then absence means it's not there, right? So if you have a recessive allele, it's only going to show up, or recessive trait's only going to show up if you don't have a copy of the dominant allele. So we're doing brown and blue eyes. Brown is dominant, blue is recessive. So let's do EX for blue eyes. EX, my example for a recessive trait would be blue eyes. Right? If you have an allele for brown eyes and you have an allele for blue eyes, what color eyes are you going to have? Yeah, you're going to have brown eyes, right? The only way you're going to have blue eyes is if you have an allele for blue eyes and another allele for blue eyes. You have two copies of the same allele. That's the only way you show the recessive trait. That's called homozygous recessive, which we'll talk about in a minute, right? But remember, this is key. If you have an allele for brown eyes and an allele for blue eyes, you're not a mixture of the two. Remember, you either are dominant or recessive. You're going to be dominant in that case because the dominant masks or takes over. All right, that is a lot of vocab. Now let's do an example. So we're going to use something called a Punnett Square to determine the probability if two parents have a kid, what chance will that kid have a certain trait? What color eyes will they have? So we'll stick with the eye color example. All right, here we go. Bum, 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 Punnett squares. All right, so Punnett squares help show the probability of a particular cross or a mating. Right, so let's write down the definition of a Punnett square. Okay, a Punnett square. Punnett square is used to predict the outcome of a cross / mating. Cross / mating. So all that means is if two parents have a kid, what's the chance or the probability that that kid they're going to have is going to have a specific trait? What color eyes are going to have, for example? All right, so let's do an example. What you're going to do, Punnett square is made of four boxes. So you're going to draw a box that looks like this. Here's my Punnett square, right? You notice it's made of 4 different boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why 4 boxes? Because you need to put the parents' alleles at the top. So you have the dad's, let's put the dad up here. So the dad's going to be up here. His copies. We're doing this for one gene. And then maybe the mom's on the side. So let's put dad on top. Here's dad. And here's mama. All right? So if this dad and this mom have a kid, what's the chance that they're going to have a particular trait? So let's do an example with eye color. So let's say the dad, let's say he's heterozygous. What heterozygous means, it means he has a copy of a dominant and a recessive allele. All right? So he's going to have a capital and lowercase letter. We use letters to represent alleles. So remember, alleles are different versions of the same gene. Dominant is always going to be capitalized because dominant is like powerful. Think powerful, capital, powerful. Recessive is like kind of weak, like, oh shoot, I don't show up unless I have 2 of myself, right? So that's going to be lowercase. So let's do an example with eye colors. Keep it the same. So this dad, we're going to say, is heterozygous. So remember, guys, a way to remember this means heterozygous, that means different. Hetero means different, right? So I'm going to write this down first. Heterozygous means 1 dominant allele and 1 recessive allele. All right, so the dad is going to be heterozygous. So we'll do eye color. So we're going to use the letter B to represent eye color. So capital is dominant. So I'm going to write big B. If he's heterozygous, he's going to have 1 dominant. So big B is dominant and 1 recessive. So what's the other allele going to be? He's going to be a little b. Yeah, so big B and a little b. He's heterozygous. You see a capital and a lowercase, those are different. Right? We have a capital, lowercase, different. Heterozygous. So he's heterozygous for eye color. So if I told you guys that brown was dominant to blue eyes, do you think this dad is going to have brown or blue eyes? Remember, you're not a mixture. You're either dominant or recessive. And he has a capital B, which is dominant. So what color eyes is dad going to have if brown is dominant? Yeah, he's going to have brown eyes. But let's make the mom, let's make her homozygous recessive. So you can be homozygous. Remember, homozygous means same. So this means same. Homo means same. Homo means same. So you can either be 2 types of homozygous. You can be homozygous dominant or you can be homozygous recessive. So you can be homozygous dominant or you can be homozygous recessive. Right? And homozygous dominant, remember, if homo means same and dominant is capitalized, what do you think you're going to be if you're homozygous dominant? Yeah, 2 capitals. So homozygous dominant is going to be, in this example, capital B, right? But if you're homozygous, which means same, and you're recessive, which means lowercase, what are you going to be? Not 2 capital B's, but you're going to be 2, that's right, 2 lowercase b's. So now knowing this, the mom has blue eyes. So she's going to be homozygous recessive. So she's going to be 2 capitals and 2 lowercase. 2 lowercase, all right? So let's write her down here on this side. So here are her 2 alleles, right? The dad was heterozygous, different, capital and lowercase. The mom was homozygous recessive, lowercase, same, and recessive, lowercase, right? So what you do here, guys, is if this dad and this mom have a kid, what chance will the kid have brown eyes? Let's figure that out. The way you figure it out is what you do is you take these alleles and you drop them down into these boxes. And you take these alleles and you drag them across. So let's do that. I'm going to take this big B. I'm going to take it down. Here comes my big B. Then I'm going to take this big B. I'm going to bring it down again. I'm going to take this little b. I'm going to bring this little b down. And take this little b. I'm going to bring this little b down. Right? Pretty good, halfway there. Now we're going to take these guys and drag them across. So I'm going to take this little b, drag them over here. Take this little b, drag it over here. Take this little b, drag it over here, and take this little b and drag it over here. All right? So there's 4 possibilities for this child. This child can either be capital B, little b, or it can be little b, capital B, little b, or little b, little b. Right? But what we notice is these are the same as each other, and these are the same as each other. Right? So out of 4 boxes, let's write this down. How many are big B, little b? So we'll say big B, little b. Remember, that's heterozygous, big B, little b. There are 2 out of how many boxes? So 1, 2 out of 4, which reduces to 1/2, which is 1/2 as a percent is 50%, right? So if this parent and this parent have a kid, there's a 50% chance that this child will be big B, little b, which is heterozygous, right? What chance will they be little b, little b? Here's little b, little b, here's little b, little b. Little b, little b, right? Which is 1, 2 out of 4. 2 out of 4, which is also 1/2, which is also 50%. Right? So there's 50% chance of a big little b, little b. All right? There's 2 new vocab words I want to go over with you guys. I'm saying big B, little b, right? I'm saying blue eyes, brown eyes. We have to differentiate between these 2 things called a genotype and a phenotype. So I'm going to write these down. All right? Let's go green, I guess. All right? So 2 vocab words that are very important. All right, genotype. Genotype. Okay, and what your genotype is your genetic makeup. It's your DNA. If I'm talking about your genotype, I'm talking about these letters. I'm talking about the genes or the alleles that you have. So genotype is your genetic makeup. And then the second big vocab word you gotta need to know is called a phenotype. So not a genotype, but a phenotype. Right? When you're talking about your phenotype, you're talking about what you actually look like. You're talking about your physical characteristics. Your physical characteristics. All right? So what you look like, right? What you look like versus your genotype is your DNA or your genes. So an easy way to remember this, guys, is your genotype is talking about your genes, G for genotype, G for genes, and your phenotype is talking about your physical appearance, what you look like, your physical characteristics, P for phenotype, P for physical characteristics, right? So I'm going to quiz you real fast. If I said someone was heterozygous for eye color, does that mean, am I describing their genotype, their genes, or what they look like? This is a kind of tough one. If I say they're heterozygous, I'm talking about their genotype. Okay, we're talking about the letters. We're talking about big B, little b, right? But if I said they have blue eyes, then I'm talking about their phenotype. That's what they actually look like. If I said they have brown eyes, I'm talking about their phenotype. All right, so I'm going to quiz you again. Here we go. If I said someone had brown hair, is that a phenotype, what they physically look like, or their genes? You're right, that's what they look like. It's a phenotype. But if I said someone was homozygous dominant for hair color, I'm talking about their genotype. All right, so let's go back to this example. We had big B, little b, that's heterozygous, different, a capital and lowercase, right? There's a 50% chance, 2 out of 4 to be big B, little b. 50% chance to be their genotype, big B, little b. But what percent chance would these two parents have of having a kid with brown eyes? So now we're talking about phenotype. Brown eyes, you have to have one or more dominant alleles. So big B, little b, right? 2 out of 4. So there's a 50% chance it'll be big B, little b, or have brown eyes, right? And what percent chance will we have blue eyes? So little b we know is recessive. And the only way you can show the recessive phenotype or the recessive characteristic in your appearance is you have to have the 2 lowercase alleles, right? So we have a 50% chance of being blue eyes. All right. So I know I'm kind of going through this fast. I hope I'm not confusing you more than helping you. So I want to do one more really quick example just to really clarify this, all right? So we're going to erase this again. We're still going to stick with eye color. We're going to keep this Punnett square, but we're going to change the parents. All right, so let's see if you guys can do this one. Because if you do this one, then I think you know how to do it. You understand it. All right? So here we go. So instead, we're going to do 2 parents that are crossed that are both heterozygous. So if the dad's heterozygous for eye color, he's going to be hetero, remember, means different. So that means it's going to be a capital dominant allele for brown. And he's going to have a lowercase allele for blue because he's heterozygous. And the mom is also heterozygous in the example, so she's also going to be a capital B and a lowercase b. All right, let's figure out how to do this. Remember, drag these down, drag these guys across. So we're going to have big B. This guy comes down again. This guy comes down again. This guy comes across. This guy comes across. This guy comes across, and this guy comes across. All right, now we've got some different things here. We got actually 3 different genotypes. We have big B. We have big B, little b, and we have little b. Ooh, interesting. Okay, not so as simple as the last one. Right, so how many out of 4 were big B? We had 1 out of 4. So 1 out of 4 is big B. How many are big B, little b? 2 out of 4. And how many are little b? 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4, right? So there is a 25% chance of being homozygous dominant. There is a 50% chance of being heterozygous, a capital and lowercase, and there is a 25% chance of being homozygous recessive. Remember, homozygous means same, recessive means lowercase, right? But those are the percentages for the genotypes. But now let me ask you, what's the percent chance that if these 2 parents, these 2 heterozygous parents have a kid, that kid's going to have brown eyes? Remember, you only need 1 dominant allele, 1 or double, right? So if you have a capital B, you're going to have brown eyes. So let's look. This guy is going to have brown eyes, right? Because he has a capital B. But so will this one, remember, because he has a capital B. So actually 3 out of 4 are going to have brown eyes. What we notice is big B, homozygous dominant will have brown eyes. Big B, little b, heterozygous will have brown eyes. So 25 plus 50, these together make 75% brown eyes. And what percent chance will have blue eyes? Exactly the same. The only way you can have blue eyes is if you have 2 recessive alleles. So little b is the only way you can show the recessive phenotype. So you have a 1/4 chance, 25, so it's still 25% blue. Whoa, all right guys, that was a lot. We talked about some new vocab, alleles, different versions of the same gene. Remember, that's because during meiosis, you get half the DNA from your mom, half from the dad. You get 1 allele from eye color from your mom, 1 allele for eye color from your dad. They come together, depending if they're dominant or recessive, determines what trait you actually have. All right guys, hope that was helpful. Remember, work hard, get smart, and I'll see you next time.